So Jack, can you talk us through stripping and cleaning, like disassembling and that? And
Sure.
yeah, show us how it's
Absolutely.
done.
So step one always whenever we're going to clean a gun is to make sure it's unloaded. So I am compelled to do this part. Like even though we cleared this gun before we started talking about it, so I'm going to check, make sure. Yep, I see no round in the chamber, and I'm good to start my disassembly of it. Generally going to take the suppressor off first. Then I've got these two pins right here on the side that removes the upper receiver assembly from the lower receiver assembly. Then in my upper receiver, I'm just going to pull the charging handle back. I'm going to remove the bolt carrier group and the charging handle. For the lower receiver, you can also pull out the action spring and the buffer. Then bolt disassembly is fairly simple. First, I'm just going to remove this pin. It's going to allow me to drop out the firing pin. These are shortened because we're at SHOT Show, so we can't have an actual live firing pin here. Pull out this cam pin, and then the bolt comes out. Of course, I have the world's cleanest bolt here. So that's pretty much the gun fully disassembled. So from here is where I'd go into my cleaning process.
Awesome. So that's the weapon system taken apart. Can you talk us through some advice coming from you guys for best practices on how to clean and then reassemble?
Oh, absolutely. So going in, we'll just hit the lower receiver first. There's really not a whole lot in here that really needs to be detailed clean. So a little bit of cleaner lubricant, just spread it off, wipe it off. Wipe off your contact surfaces and anywhere that like metal contacts metal. Want to get a little drop of lubricant on those things. Different environments, I'm going to use a different level of lubrication. So if I'm operating in the jungle, or like a normal forest or European theater, I'm probably going to have a lot of lubricant, through most of this. If I go into a more desert area, I'm going to be reducing some of that just to stop the amount of stickage of things onto parts where I don't really need it. Like magwell, I don't need a lot of lubricant in there. If I'm in the desert, because sand is going to stick into it, and it's going to be hard to put a magazine in and take a magazine out. Those kind of things. Kind of for the rest of the upper receiver as well. Whereas if I'm working there where I'm going to have a lot of rainfall, I'm going to be going through a lot of water. Then we're going to have more lubricant, more protectant on those parts, just so that it stays there and I don't get corrosion issues. So the general wipe down of that, get a rag in, into the receiver extension, get that wiped out. You're pretty well done. Quick wipe down of the spring, get that back in. Wipe down of your buffer and the face of that, and get that back in. From there, I'm going to be looking at my bolt carrier group. So this be a light wipe down on the outside. If you get any sticky, bits of carbon, brush that off, and then get a rag inside the internal area here in your expansion chamber. Make sure that's cleaned out. So this is hard chrome lined, and because it has to ride these surfaces of the bolt itself, so it needs to ride on that little shiny part you can see right there, as well as the gas ring. So the gas ring is what's containing all that pressure. You can see the fouling on the back side here. So that's really showing you where that gas is coming in and going into this carrier. So when everything's assembled, you can see where that is kind of going to sit right back in that area here. So that'd be kind of the locked position. That's what I'd be seeing here. And then this is where the gas key is going to be dumping that pressure and that hot pressurized gas right here on the back side. So there's a wall inside of the carrier right here. And so that provides that area where that gas is going to get trapped. And then that's going to push forward on the bolt. So the bolt's going to be pushed forward as the carrier is being pushed to the rear. So I want to make sure those areas are clean, that don't have sand in there, because that could damage the gas rings, and that's an important part of the system. So once that's all cleaned up, then I'm going to go to the bolt itself, a good wipe down of everything, and I'm going to be looking for my ejectors as well as my extractor, that extractor lip. I want to make sure all this is clean, that I don't have any kind of chunks or sand or Cheetos stuck in any of these areas here. Just give that a good wipe down. This back part, you want to try to get some of that carbon off. It's going to be a kind of baked on carbon. You can kind of see it here that it's pretty stout. Like that's not just flaking off. So that's going to build up. What I don't want to do is like be heavily attacking this, with a wire brush and scraping it, because you can start to remove some of the coatings on here that are protective. You can also damage those gas rings.
Yep.
So I want to really keep those in good shape. They will wear out eventually, but they'll last a really long time if you take care of them. So if you don't damage that, it's gonna pretty much last about half the life of the bolt. You're gonna be looking about 10,000 rounds for those gas rings. Once that's all wiped off, cleaned up, and lightly lubricated, I'm going to lubricate the gas ring area. I'm going to lubricate this surface here. I'm going to get 2 drops here and here because that's where the springs are that's going to actually actuate the extractor. So that's going to go in, and I'm going to orient it so the extractor is facing off to the right, and I've got a lineup of the hole of the bolt itself there in the carrier because that's where my cam pin's going to go. So cam pin, just to light wipe off, there's really not going to be much here, despite what my hands are saying. That slides in, extend the bolt, and then just turn that sideways so that it's now working, it's intersecting, so it's got a lateral position. So that has a hole in it, which is going to allow the firing pin to go through it because I can get my firing pin all the way through so that it can contact the primer. It's going to drop in from the rear, be pushed forward. I'm going to push it all the way forward. I'm going to hold it there with my finger, and then I'm going to insert the firing pin retaining pin. So that just slides in that hole right there, push it straight through, and then I'm going to twist it so it's facing straight up and down. Basically what that does is it takes that pin, which has 2 separate floppy sides basically, and it's going to turn them so that both of those legs are getting the impact from the firing pin. So during reciprocation, as this is rocking back and forth, there's going to be impact to that retaining pin because that's its job. So if I have that turned in this direction, it'll make that pin last a little bit longer. Charging handle, just gonna be a quick wipe down. When it comes to lubing and reassembling, I'm gonna put a couple points right there, right there, right there, and then just a light coating over it, and make sure this internal slot is free, because this interfaces with the bolt carrier just like this. So whenever I'm pulling it back to move this back to charge the weapon or to unload it, and I pulled it back on this lever, it's pulling this whole carrier back from that sledge right there. But as you see, it covers the gas key area. So that's where the gas tube goes into the gas key. So when this moves and starts to unlock and move rearward, you're going to get kind of some blow by that's going to start to deposit some fouling here in the inside of the charging handle. So I just want to wipe that out.
Yeah.
Upper receiver is fairly simple. I'm just going to wipe everything out of here, try to keep that as clean as possible. You see your gas tube there. I don't want to be smashing at that or like shoving screwdrivers into it or trying to move it around. I want to leave that alone. Just get it wiped off because, like I said, it's sitting inside of this gas key. So you're gonna get some carbon fouling that's going to stick inside of that area. I'm going to use my normal barrel cleaning tools to clear out the barrel extension, those locking lugs, and the bore itself. You notice also that you've got your handguards kind of covering your barrel. Right, and so this is a phosphated barrel. We're looking at some other coatings to kind of reduce the amount of maintenance that's required on this area, but a little bit of oil through there on the barrel was really helpful.
Yeah.
Don't go too much because then you start shooting the gun heavily, it's going to start to smoke, and that's generally going to be a non-positive event. This is your dust cover or your ejector port cover. So I just want to make sure that's cleaned off, a little bit of lubricant and oil on the outside just to keep it from rusting. Watching that spring, make sure the spring's doing its job, and flipping that door open. And then we're really going to come to some important parts here. So really talking about the suppressor interface and the muzzle device.
Yeah.
So when the suppressor goes on, the ball pockets are going to trap those locking spheres. And as I tighten that collar, it's going to pull the suppressor rearward, so it's going to lock on this 45. This front edge here is going to be interfacing inside the suppressor to keep it aligned. It's going to lock back on this 45, and it's drawing everything back and it's crushing this all together. So that's the important part of this is that you've got these ball pockets that, as you're firing, you're going to get carbon and copper is going to start to accumulate on the suppressor mounting surfaces and back these locking surfaces.
Yep.
So once I take this apart, I want to get all that cleaned out so that I get the locking spheres can move all the way into these ball pockets. If they don't make it all the way in, if you're not fully achieving a lock, the suppressor will come off.
Yep.
So that's also why we have to have it properly aligned. That's why we have little directions on the suppressor to make sure that people understand that this needs to be in this position here. So I'm going to spend some time through here, make sure this is all cleaned off. Carbon is mostly going to accumulate right here, which is good where your problem for removal is going to come in on. So I want to keep this area very clean. These grooves right here are to help kind of like hold carbon and hold that fouling. Instead of all just building up on the surface, it's got somewhere to go. It's got somewhere inside that fouling can go and sit, so you can get the suppressor on and off more easily. But you are going to get accumulation of carbon copper on this as well as inside the suppressor itself. So I want to make sure that's clean. I want to make sure it's wiped down, but I do not want to put a lot of standing oil on this because that oil is going to get hot. It's going to burn, and then it's going to want to turn into more and more carbon. It's going to be more and more of a problem to get off. So on the suppressor, what I'm going to be looking at is this surface right inside here, right where those ball pockets are. That edge, you can see that 45 edge. If you look down, that little shiny bit right there, that's what's actually sealing against that 45 angle here on the front edge of the mount. And then if you look in deeper, you can see another ring, and that's what's going to hold that front end for the front end support. So I want to make sure when I'm cleaning this suppressor out, I want to make sure that I'm brushing everything away from here. And I also want to be cognizant of the fact that I can get accumulation of fouling and carbon inside those ball pockets also that actually hold the locking spheres. So I'm going to brush through there. I want to make sure it's clean, and I'm going to tighten the suppressor down until it's nice and tight. Once it's tight, you can see that those locking spheres have now moved up, right? So I want to go through, I want to knock any carbon that I can see on there. I'll loosen it up, go back through, run another brush around, and then go back, lock it back down again, and those ball pockets are going to start moving.
Yeah.
You know, so as carbon starts hitting the locking surfaces of the locking collar, it's going to move that ball around, so you can get fresh carbon that you're going to see. Just knock that off, run that a couple times, you're good to go. Again, I'm not going to put standing cleaner or lubricant on those surfaces or inside the suppressor because it's going to burn and it's going to be a problem. So I want these to be fairly clean and dry. I want it to be clean and wiped off. At that point, go back on. There's no problem with taking the suppressor on and off after every single use, cleaning it up. It's going to ensure that you're not going to get that carbon lock. You know, if I leave the suppressor on that gun and shoot 5,000 rounds, I'm going to need to soak this in some type of a carbon cleaner just to get the suppressor off.
Better to be proactive with your cleaning than reactive.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's no danger in cleaning a gun. You know, there as long as you're doing best practices and you're following the normal rules of good maintenance. You know, if you're not doing anything abusive or abrasive, you know, but not doing it will definitely lead to problems.
Awesome. When you're talking about the barrel and suppressor, can you talk us through kind of how many rounds it can take and the expectations of when you're looking for the identifiers of when that's going to start to fail and taper off? Can you talk us through that?
System life is going to be directly correlated to abusiveness of use. You know, like the gun is containing an explosion and throwing a tiny chunk of metal out of it every time you pull the trigger. You know, so it is already in a hostile environment. You know, if you space that out to let the gun get very hot, you're going to last longer than if you're doing full auto fire mag dumps all the time. You know, like I can make a gun last 50,000 rounds, or I can kill it in 500 rounds. You know, it all depends on how mean you want to be to it. Generally speaking, under normal, reasonable military application, I'm going to be looking at 20 to 25,000 rounds for the barrel and bolt.
Okay.
You know, there's other little parts in the system that I'm going to update more frequently. You know, springs wear. You know, so things like the action spring. You know, I'm going to be looking at about a replacement of that about every 5,000 rounds. Extractor springs about every 10,000 rounds. You know, trigger springs are going to last for a pretty long time unless something happens to them. You know, we tend to see more things happen, you know, through an accident or, you know, an error on the user's part, and that'll lead to that thing going out. You know, not to pass that off as their responsibility, but you know, it's if you maintain the system on a regular basis, kind of in those like 5,000, 10,000 round intervals, it's going to last, you know, a very, very long time. You're looking at like overall system life, you know, in the 50 to 100,000 round area. You know, like I said, barrel's going to come out and get replaced 20, 25,000 rounds, bolt 20, 25,000 rounds.
Yeah.
It's pretty much if you replace a barrel, replace a bolt.
Yeah.
So you know, the two major wear items here, as far as the system is concerned, really is the barrel and bolt. You know, the suppressor is extremely durable. You know, it's going to last at least as long as that barrel, unless you really go out of your way to try to destroy the suppressor, and you're going to be seeing the same thing inside the barrel at the same time.
Nice.
So when it comes to evaluating that use of like, how do I know when this thing is done? You know, there is standard gauging that's going to be done, you know, by an armor. He's going to be checking things like head space, throat erosion, you know, bore straightness, the condition of your crown, the condition of your port. Generally speaking, though, you know, you're really not going to be looking for a whole lot to happen, you know, on the port. You know, other than I see that the gun's running faster than it was before, or I'm starting to see some failures. I'm starting to see some things that come up that could be attributed, you know, to excessive gas or insufficient gas. Suppressor, really, the judge is going to be: is it still doing its job? You know, we didn't really talk through the suppressor, so suppressor cleaning is kind of a thing. And one of the best things you can do really is to submerge that suppressor, you know, right up into, you know, so that all the baffles are under a solvent, and just leave it in a good carbon and copper remover, you know, for a day.
Yeah.
Pull it out, drain it out, let it, you know, soak it, allow it to break up all those contaminants and fouling, and then rinse it out. Just try to get all the chunks out of it, and that's going to keep it performing. Because as carbon sticks in there, it changes the dynamic of flow, and that's going to change your performance level. So recommend doing that every 2,000, 2,500 rounds, and that'll keep it out acting as new for a long time. You don't really have to clean a suppressor from a safety standpoint. You have to clean a suppressor from a performance a performance standpoint. It's kind of like optic glass. Like, well, if you never wipe it off the lens, then your image sucks. Like, well, if you never clean your suppressor, you're not going to get suppression. If you don't clean your bore, you're not going to get accuracy. So these things do require some maintenance. To get that fouling out of there.
Awesome. We spoke earlier about operating in different environments. You mentioned like arid environments, humid environments, Arctic environments, even European theaters. Can you talk us through like the weapon system's different capabilities in those environments, or anything to look out for our community in those environments?
Certainly. I mean, so right off the bat, the first thing is that most external surfaces are aluminum, stainless steel, and all coated. So not a lot of concern about corrosion or rust on the outside. Really, what we're looking for is the operating environment. What kind of lubricants, what do I have going on inside to make sure the gun keeps running? And so then you look at what are the environmental factors that are going to change as we go through that. So if I'm operating in standard kind of Happy Days in England is different than if I'm in Norway or if I'm in Saudi Arabia. So when it comes to like high dust areas or things where I've got an issue with airborne particulates, I'm going to reduce the amount of internal and external lubrication to ensure that I don't have lubricants in places where I don't need it. So I need lubrication inside of the operating system. I need it on the bolt, I need it on the bolt carrier, and that's really it. I don't need lubrication inside of the mag well. It's not going to rust. It's aluminum. It's anodized aluminum. It's going to be just fine. And I don't really need a whole lot of it on the barrel because I'm not going to be going through a bunch of water or humidity concerns. So really I'm going to be looking at reducing the amount of standing liquid lubrication in anywhere other than my critical parts. Now, when I change that over, let's say now I'm in especially like a Norway environment or Arctic environment where I am dealing with cold and I'm dealing with water. Because while we're surrounded in snow and ice, once these things heat up, that starts to intrude, and now I've got to deal with some other things. So there we're going to be looking at making sure that I've got oil on the barrel itself to avoid corrosion. So this is a phosphate coating. And phosphate does a really good job of holding oil, but it also means if there's not oil there, then you got a lot of exposed surface. So I want to have something in there to protect it. And at that point, though, I might be looking at having some additional amounts of lubrication in areas because I know I'm going to get water intrusion. So I'm getting water intrusion that's going to wipe away some of those things. So I want to have a little bit extra. I want to have a little bit more to deal with. But we're really going to be looking at is frequency of cleaning and maintenance. So obviously you're going to do your standard best practices when you're in the Arctic, to keep the guns cold. Don't start taking them in and out of hot, cold environments. Then you're going to build ice, and when you start putting physical blockages inside the system, you're going to have an issue. So normal best practices for firearms maintenance, firearms use inside those environments. Then when I look at going into other environments or environments with kind of more dust, I want to make sure I'm wiping those things off. I want to keep that grit away from them as much as possible. So it's going to stop wear that's going to be on these systems. Thing to be aware of, like this does have a coating on it. So this isn't part of the metal. This is effectively a very, very durable paint, but it's still a paint. So there will be wear, especially if you're in an abrasive environment where you can start wearing off parts of the coating, and especially on the side where you're carrying it. So don't be surprised if you see that. But if you reduce the amount of standing mud and dust on those areas, then it's going to reduce the wear that you're going to see on the parts.
Awesome. That's awesome, Jack. So final question. So for those in our community who aren't armorers or armorer trained, what's some best practice pre-firing checks that they can do and perform on this weapon system?
Yeah, great. So first thing that I would do is I take the gun apart, get everything wiped off, get a good look at all the parts, can make sure it's all assembled correctly. So just as we did to that walkthrough. So I'm going to go through some of my pre-firing checks. So one, I'm going to check the suppressor, make sure that ratchet mechanism is correct, make sure it comes off, make sure it goes back on. I'm going to be watching the amount of travel as I lock this collar down. You can kind of feel when you feel like a ramp up in pressure as it comes into that lock. You feel like a sudden stop, then that gives you good indication that something's wrong. Let me give it a little wiggle, make sure it's seated, make sure that I don't feel any movement inside of that mount. Whenever I'm mounting this, I'm making sure that I'm seeing that index pin going into that index notch that's going all the way down. I'll generally bring the gun up, muzzle up for that tightening process there, just to make sure this is not moving around on me at all. When it comes to the gun itself, once I've already checked all the internals, so I'm going to check the fire control in here. So I'm going to pull that charging handle to the rear. I'm going to make sure that it moves back. I'm going to make sure that it rotates the fire. I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to make sure that it fires. I'm going to keep my finger on the trigger, pull it back again, let it out, and then pull it again, make sure that it actually does fire. From there, cock it one more time, put it on safe, pull the trigger, make sure that it does not fire.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the quick pre-firing check to just make sure that the operation of the gun is correct. When it comes into the firing pin, I can't really show you this because the firing pin is short, but I'll pull the carrier out when I do the assembly, pull that bolt to the rear, push up on the firing pin, make sure that everything looks right, that I got the trees of the firing pin, that all the parts are moving properly.
Awesome. Jack, thank you so much for your
Absolutely.
time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. So hopefully that answers a lot of questions for our community. If you have any questions for us or Jack, please put them in the comments section below. From everyone behind the team at Stoic Conditioning, wherever you are in the world, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next one.